up guys, KPlaysHere. Come, let's hang out for a bit while I hunt and talk hunting horn. Fair warning though, this one's not going to be quite as much about the love of the doots as all my others. Cause as time goes on, I've realized something. Wild hunting horn has some pretty hefty drawbacks built into it, and despite how significant they are to our performance, I'm not really seeing them mentioned all that much. With the first title update, we've got ourselves some patch notes to go over, and apparently, there will be some weapon balance changes. That's great news, because it means that we could see some of the things I had in mind get addressed. So let's see what they mentioned for the good old dude stick. Ha. Well, okay, this is actually pretty great for us. Huge even. The issue with the Note 3 button inputs not being queued properly during the echo bubbles or focus strike windows is probably the #1 most common complaint right now for all hunting horn users. Yes, if you've noticed this problem, a lot of us have too. You're not crazy. As far as I know anyway. There are workarounds like the button remapping trick on Steam, but seeing the issue mentioned in the official patch notes means that A, it's an actual performance issue rather than a skill or timing thing, and B, Capcom's heard the call for a fix and did what they could to answer it. Which is great. But I'd say that that's just a small start towards the steps that hunting horn needs to be in a perfect place. And I know what some of you might be thinking. KPlays, haven't you been spending the last several months praising absolutely everything about Wild hunting horn? And the answer to that is yes. I love this thing. I still love this thing. The redesign went a long way towards improving my favorite weapon in the game. If you ask me though, part of being able to really appreciate something is being able to notice its flaws. You gotta acknowledge the pros with the cons, you know? And hunting horn has some really weird cons this time around. Unlike the button input thing, a lot of these aren't nearly as widely known, so rather than just being me complaining about these things, this is gonna be more of a video for spreading awareness. Who knows, if some of those things I'm about to list become bigger talking points, there's a chance that we'll see some adjustments later down the line. With all that preamble out of the way though, let's get into the other side of Wild's hunting horn conversation. The first thing that some of you might have noticed is the fact that while mounted on the Sacred, we're no longer able to play songs and move at the same time. In the beta we could do this through a sort of weird button sequence. Since the start recital button is the same as the make your Sacred stop moving button, the input overlap will make you do both at the same time. Hitting up on the D-pad a few times will get your mount up and running again without stopping a recital, allowing you to charge epically into battle playing your songs of the hunt. Now though, that trick is no longer the case. No matter what you push, you can't get moving until your recital is over. That's a shame since this trick made buffing before the fight super streamlined, and without it we're back to the most efficient way being on the ground. You can still stock notes on the go at least, but the mounted recital was the real tool you'd want to use here. Now we could look at this in one of two ways. Because of the weird way you access the mounting recital, this may have never been an intended ability for hunting horn in the first place. But seeing as there were animations for it and everything, I don't know about that. What I'm thinking is more likely is that they access to further limit corner/pocket horning. After all, how easy would it be to just juggle spamming buffs if you could just play while mounted? The catch here though is that limiting pocket horning in that way also negatively impacts real horning, and that's just plain counterintuitive. There's already a built-in anti-pocket horn function in the way that song timers get slashed in half if you swap any weapon besides a hunting horn, which handles things in the opposite but absolutely correct way since it indirectly benefits players who go all in and use two horns. Why remove extra functionality too? The fix here is simple. Bring back the mounted recital. I want to do while I scoot. Speaking of anti-pocket horning measures, we also need to talk about the self-improvement in attack up rebalancing. I went into this deeper in my pocket horn solution video a while ago, which I suggest watching for a more detailed look at that change. But for the purposes of this conversation, here's the short version. In order to stop players from just slapping attack up onto another weapon and calling it a day, the song was significantly nerfed while self-improvement's attack boost was increased. This, in theory, was a great move for hunting horn's overall standing in the game. Every song list now has the most important damage buff for a hunting horn user specifically. Attack up is no longer nearly as dominant for horn choices, and a 4 to 10% buff is a lot less attractive for exploiting with other weapons than a 15 to 20% buff would be. Life should be good here, right? Well, it would be if this didn't result in an overall net nerf for hunting horn. Let me explain. The main reason for this is where attack boosting falls in this damage equation. I'm no Monster Hunter math whiz, so I'll be keeping things very basic here, but the most important part to know is that in past games, a key factor for attack boosting songs is that hunting horn boosts applied after you accounted for extra attack power from skills. This means that you would multiply your attack boost, your peak performance, your agitator, etc. Now, however, it only applies to our base roll before skills. So even though the self-improvement multiplier has increased from 15 to 20% between World and Wilds, we actually take a bit of a hit to our effective raw. That's right, increased numbers, lower total damage.
That math? It ain't mathin'. Make it make sense.
We're not quite at the point yet where that difference will start to show, but the more raw attack we get to work with, like in the Master Rank expansion for example, the more that gap will widen. Couple this with the loss of a majority of the attack up bonus, and the drop in buffing power in between games is even more noticeable than we would have initially thought if the mechanics just stayed the same. Now I haven't done any direct comparisons between the two, but I'm assuming that Wild's Hunting Horn is still far ahead of World's Hunting Horn in terms of damage output thanks to all of its other moveset and mechanical overhauls. But Wild's Hunting Horn doesn't have to currently compete with its former self, now does it? It's going up against the current roster of weapons, each having their own set of overhauls that don't negatively impact them. A change that deliberately goes in the opposite direction and weakens Hunting Horn compared to where it stood before sticks out like a sore thumb among its other improvements it received. We really do not need nerfs. The fix here, also simple. Revert self-improvements bonus back to the post-skill attack increase, and we're all good. You'd think I also asked for attack up to be put back to its former glory, but honestly, I kinda like where the change brought us, even outside of fixing the pocket horn problem. We have a nice, healthy relationship with the song of all songs now, to the point where, if we want to put it down, not use it for a bit, is completely okay and not a massive damage loss for once. Speaking of damage losses though, we've got to talk about Soundwave mechanics. Some of these are just strange, and despite them adding a ton of damage to Hunting Horn's kit, they're currently in some ways holding us back versus other weapons. To start off this part of the conversation, there's a super brief rundown of the way sound attacks work. At the most basic level, what set these apart from regular physical Hunting Horn hits is that they have set sharpness multipliers, and with the exception of Echo Wave Slash, they can't crit. This adds a bit of flavor to the weapon since it can essentially damage a target without actually making contact, but from a game mechanics perspective, these factors translate to some hefty drawbacks. Take for example that set sharpness multiplier. You know which color of sharpness Soundwaves use to calculate their damage? Yellow. You know, the color that we left back in that beginning of low rank. That's a 1 times multiplier for raw damage and 0.75 times for element, which is just painful compared to the 1.32 time and 1.15 times multipliers respectively we see on white sharpness weapon hits. For the non-math inclined players out there, this results in a pretty significant drop off when it comes to Soundwave damage scaling as soon as you start getting to mid to late game weapons with blue and white sharpness, and even more once we hit purple and master rank. You're pretty much stuck with a weapon that has appropriate raw, half of its hits doing appropriate sharpness damage, and half of its hits stuck way back in low rank. Missing out in crits is also big, translating to anywhere from a 25 to 40% damage loss on those attacks depending on how many levels of crit boost you're running. As you can imagine, all this sets Hunting Horn apart from weapons that take full advantage of crits and sharpness in a not so good way, considering that Soundwave damage accounts for a significant portion of your attacks. Your Echo Waves, your Echo Bubbles, your Resounding Melee, etc, etc.
In the beta, where we didn't have any affinity and everything pretty much only had green or yellow sharpness, Hunting Horn was actually a pretty good mid-tier weapon. But now, 14th place overall across the weapon roster when it comes to damage potential, where we by all rights got every tool we needed to succeed. Faster and harder hitting recital combos, Echo Waves for added power during said combos, Echo Bubbles for extra free damage. But then again, there are also varying degrees of mechanical weirdness to all of these as well. We got a new move that adds damage to recitals when perfectly timed, but oddly enough, you can also match the damage of a full performance beat combo by just ignoring them entirely in favor of cranking out single recital encore combos. Elemental and status Echo Waves, for some reason, use a set value separate from the stats actually attached to the weapon, 60 element and 50 status per wave respectively. They're boosted by skills, but this puts us in an awkward place where these attacks are essentially coming from a totally different set of stats. This can hypothetically be a good thing or a bad thing. For example, if you had a Hunting Horn with a stat of 1000 or 100 true fire damage, you're out of luck because your Echo Waves will always act like you have 60 true element. But if you have a high raw horn with a measly 10 true paralysis, as far as your status Echo Waves are concerned, you actually have 5 times that. Confusing you yet? Because it sure confused me when I learned that they were designed this way. Literally why? And Echo Bubbles. Oh, Echo Bubbles. Remember the dream of getting 4 horn players together and dropping 3 bubbles down each for some musical mayhem? Yeah, the limit in multiplayer is 5, regardless of the source. Not even 6. 5. That means that at just 2 horn players, you're already at a loss in bubble damage because one of you will only be able to place 2.
I get that this one might be a safeguard to avoid the game exploding from all the particle effects you'd see with a whopping 12 bubbles on screen at once, but still, sad Hunting Horn player is sad. And to make it worse, yes, there's more. It turns out that Echo Bubble Bursts, the things that should be racking up more extra damage for us, share a new tendency some of Hunting Horn's moveset has to magnetize the hit zones you don't want them to, instead of, to the head if it's within reach like what used to be the case. Now these all would take a lot more than simple tweaks to fix like the first few issues. If it were in my hands, I'd probably suggest all this. First, have Soundwaves magnetize to the head again, and scale them with sharpness. They did this in past games, they could do it now. It's not a huge ask. Crits would be nice too, but I think we pull ahead a lot on the sharpness wave multiplier benefits alone. Besides, if every Soundwave could crit, Echo Wave Slash would lose its niche. I prefer not to make Hunting Horn the same across the board, just a little stronger. Next, element echo waves need to either scale off the base element or work like bowgun ammo where there's a sort of elemental motion value that scales with raw. The latter is how we over the HornPub Discord originally thought it would work. And a side note, if you haven't checked that out already and you're here listening to a Hunting Horn Fanatics videos, what are you doing? Join us, links in the description. Community plug aside though, this would let you scale element as you boosted your raw. Efficient, but slightly one-dimensional when it comes to set building. Scaling with your element stat instead might make for a more interesting split between raw and elemental Hunting Horn builds. But then again, this is a hypothetical chain, so I can only dig into those differences but so much. Status waves, I don't know, I actually kinda like them the way they are since they're single-handedly carrying Hunting Horn to the title of best status weapon in the game. And Hunting Horn really needs those wins right now. The fixed damage nature of these status values don't really come into play until you get some ridiculous stats on your weapon. So I'd probably just let these be the unique, if not possibly unintended advantage that they are. As for the rest, perfect performance beats could possibly get a buff so that they're the clear winner across all Hunting Horn combos, but I'm also split when it comes to changing things here too. You won't always have time to lay down perfect full recital combos, so it's nice to have different options for different attacking openings. Hit and run single song encores offer a more low commitment playstyle option to shift to on the fly. Maybe perfect beats could have some other effect besides just the increased damage. I'd say offset attack capabilities, but we already have offset melody for that. So maybe just hyper armor for an aggressive defensive tool. There's a possibility. Lastly, if it turns out that more than 5 bubbles wouldn't in fact break the game, give us more bubbles. Because if it's not a performance thing, it's literally just a middle finger to groups with more than one Hunting Horn user. If it does interfere with how the game runs though, yeah, okay. We could instead be limited to 1 bubble per horn in user and multiplayer, but the damage would increase to what you'd expect from 3 bubbles. Don't know if programming that is something that would be possible, but it's definitely a better fix than effectively cutting damage in online hunts from the weapon that's supposed to shine in that setting. Hopefully though, these are all the personal gripes I have with Hunting Horn's handling in this game. As you can see, I like to think of solutions to match up with problems instead of just complaining, so maybe if these problems get some more traction, they'll have a chance to being addressed in the future, like I said before. If not in the ways I'd like, then maybe in some way. And don't take any of this the wrong way. Again, I still absolutely love the Hunting Horn. Design flaws or no design flaws. All the screwery under the hood aside, the full package is still fun as hell to use, and the gameplay feel itself is miles ahead of any past version. I just wish that Capcom wouldn't be afraid to let Hunting Horn be strong for once sometimes, you know? It's like, they were really cooking when they were making this thing, but then, I don't know, somebody added salt when they should have added sugar or something. Some of these design choices just don't really seem to fit with the otherwise clear direction everything else is working towards when it comes to making Hunting Horn an overall improved weapon. A majority of these things I've noticed feel like intentional limiters on the weapon, and unnecessary ones at that, since Hunting Horn would probably be fairly balanced still without them. Buffing abilities and a little extra oomph are hardly gonna break the game, guys. This is probably the best it's ever felt to be in last place, but somewhere near the lower middle would probably feel even better. Hint hint, nudge nudge, please buff Hunting Horn. Capcom. Please. But I'll leave it at that. And as usual, open up the discussion to you guys in the comments. What do you guys think about all this? Is any of it new to you, and do you think we're fine as is, or do you agree that we could do with some improvements? I'm interested to hear the feedback on what's probably my first ever not fully positive video on Hunting Horn. Till next time though, this has been another KPlays, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.